And welcome back to our video on demand section at WMMBAM.com. As through this political season, we're having the fortune of having these candidates for a few extra minutes after the show. Today it's state's attorney candidates Phil Archer on the Republican side and Ryan Vescio on the Democrat side. Gentlemen, great interview on the radio, probably one of the best that we've had of this political season. I appreciate your knowledge and insight as we talked about your office. Let's talk about, in this segment, at least as we started out, the distinction between the two of you. I mean, you both come to the table with great skills, great ability to talk about the office. How do voters tell the difference in how they want to go? Phil, let me start with you.
Well, again, I think it comes down to looking at the experience factor. I've got 28 years in the state attorney's office and wide, broad-based experience from every trial division, every division within the office, including the administrative side. You know, you can't discount the administrative side experience because it's basically we're running the largest law firm in Brevard and Seminole County. And you have to have the experience to know how to put programs together, how to select, hire attorneys, how to fire attorneys, how to put budgets together, how to go out and work with police chiefs and community leaders and other political leaders. You know, believe it or not, Bill, there's a lot of politics involved when you're dealing with police chiefs and other elected
I didn't
officials.
experience that in my 17 years, ever.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that story, but later.
But you know, that's a part of that learning process. And so those are the relationships that I've built over those 28 years. I know who the community leaders are. I know who the real community leaders are because I've been out there working with them in the community. And so I think that's one of the biggest differences between my 28 years in this county, in Brevard and Seminole County, in the circuit of broad experience, working those relationships so that I know how to get the job done. I think that's going to be the biggest difference.
All right, very good. Ryan Vescio.
Well, I think that our mission at the end of the day, and I think sometimes things are relatively simple. And, our mission at the end of the day is to put bad guys away and to prevent people from becoming victims. And that ends in the courtroom. And I'm proud of my experience in the courtroom. I know what it takes to prosecute a case today. I know what our defendants, our suspects are doing out there. I know the tools that they're using, and I know the tools that we're not using to get that job done. I'm very proud of my experience of 2,500 cases in the courtroom. But more than that, my experience in training law enforcement and prosecutors and service providers statewide on issues such as computer crimes, human and sex trafficking, which is of an epidemic proportion here in Florida. 1 out of every 4 homeless teenagers is a victim of human trafficking or sex trafficking. It's a problem that we're not addressing. It's a problem that I've been working on in the courtroom, handling the first ever case in the state of Florida in human and sex trafficking. But I've also worked with that with our law enforcement to establish policy, to establish best practices, and to also do case evaluation at the end of the day of where we fell short in the beginning. I'm proud of my work of working with our local agencies on task forces and policy, working within the office on hiring lawyers, training lawyers, giving our prosecutors the tools that they need. But having been in the trenches every single day, I know the resources that we need. I know what resources work and what resources people outside back at the office think would work but aren't getting the job done. And we don't have the money these days to do our full job, and we need to prioritize. And I think it's the job of our state attorney to know what's effective and what works, to be able to relate firsthand out to the community, and to know all the community partners.
Well, that's a great transition point, so let me get to the next question here, and that is the budget as it exists now in the state's attorney's office. Is it adequate to get the job done? Are you going to have to go to the county commission and say we've got to have better funding? Or does the funding even come through the county commission at all, or is that a state thing?
No.
Tell me about the funding and the budget and what the needs are and how you see it if you're elected.
The budget's approximately $19.6 million. And if you look at the number of cases that the office filed last year, that means that we get $351 a case. And that's $351 for a suspended license case, but that's also $351 for a capital murder case. And our funding comes from Tallahassee. So we have to go up there and fight with the legislature, and budgets statewide for state attorneys' offices are down over 10% the last 4 years. And what that means is that we're at a point to where we have to prioritize. But we also have to recognize tools and partnerships that we can use that are low resource but high yield. For instance, in domestic violence cases. Domestic violence is up over 6% here in Brevard. By working with our service providers in the community, Safe House, Harbor House, all the other shelters, to reach to our victims, but also working with the school board, for instance, on education policies that we can educate parents and teachers on signs of abuse. Those sorts of partnerships don't cost us any money to make. They require our prosecutors to give an hour or two of their time to go and work and help to educate our victim service people. And I will say that this office has great victim services. But we need to really prioritize and put our focus where it matters the most. And that may mean that some of the smaller cases, we got to get them out of the system. We got to get them resolved so we can work on the burglaries, the robberies, the homicides.
All right, very good. Phil Archer, budgeting in the office as it exists, and what you'd like to see if you're elected here.
Absolutely. Well, first
pull
of
that
all,
mic just a little closer. Don't want to lose you on the audio.
Yeah, first of all, there's never enough money. I mean, I think that's obviously we'd always like to have more money, but it goes back to what I talked about earlier in the show. Is you've got to leverage your resources. You've got to build those partnerships. Not only 10% budget cut. When you put that in perspective, 95% of our budget is salaries. So when you're cutting to 10%, you're cutting positions, and we lost over 15 positions during that time frame. And that hurts in trying to do a lot of the specialized things that you want to do. You're talking about the public corruption unit. In order to establish a unit like that, you've got to have positions to do that kind of thing, and that's almost impossible with those kind of budget cutbacks. You have to learn to leverage your resources and use other agencies to partner with you, and that's why on public corruption, we'll use FDLE, we'll use those agencies to do the investigative part so that we can leverage those resources. And prioritize. One of the discussions I've had with one of the candidates for sheriff is we want to start an economic crimes task force. Again, leveraging resources, pulling in, one officer from each of the major divisions with the sheriff's department, with FDLE, with the IRS, and then having one attorney assigned from our office to that task force. So instead of us trying to create that separate, task force within our office, now we're leveraging all those different agencies, all those resources, not only from the national government or federal government, but also from state and local agencies. So it's extremely important. Our budgets the last 2 years have been, they haven't cut us, which has been great. But we're confident, hopefully, that those budgets are going to hold up so that at least we can not cut any more positions, and that's very important. We don't want to cut more positions.
All right. One of my key concerns in this race is at least the appearance out of the current office that public corruption style cases, and several were brought up by callers on the show when we were on the radio, is that the current administration has kind of played these cases down, maybe not handled them the way the public would like to see them handled. Give me your view on public corruption style cases and how you want to see them handled if you're elected. And Phil, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. And and let me go back. When we talk about this public corruption unit, I know Ryan's been involved in Orange County. Jeff Ashton, the new state attorney, has called that unit unnecessary and ineffective, and is going to get rid of it, basically. And that's because you can handle that in-house, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to be very aggressive. I mean, I go back to what I told you before. I'm going to reestablish a white-collar crime division, so public corruption will be very important in that, within that priority. But we will leverage our resources. I have full faith in Florida Department of Law Enforcement being able to investigate public corruption cases. Wayne Ivey was a special agent in charge here for several years. I don't doubt his effectiveness or his integrity in investigating public corruption cases, and I don't think anybody else should either. The current special agent in charge, John King, excellent investigator. So I have.
But the call comes down to it at the end from the state's attorney's office: is charge, don't charge, and that will be in your hands.
Absolutely, and I'm like I said, that's why it's a number one priority: fraud, white collar crime. We'll be very aggressive in going after that. To me, public corruption goes to the heart of our system. If people don't have faith in our public officials and the system, that's very dangerous for all of us. So we'll be very aggressive in that. But again, I would, like I asked the caller, is it this situation where a case was actually presented to us and we didn't file a case? I mean, if you have an example of that, I'd be glad to look at that. But I think a lot of times people perceive that there's an issue, and when they go to a law enforcement agency to have it investigated, either the investigation doesn't turn up enough evidence to present that case to our office, so it doesn't get to our office. So we have to get the case to us first, and that's why we'll work very closely with Florida Department of Law Enforcement or any other investigative agency to make sure that they are putting time and resources into those investigations. Get it to me. I mean, I don't know what else I can tell you. I'm not Norm Wolfinger. I'm Phil Archer. I've got a background in white collar crime. I ran that division for 10 years. I've made it my number one priority of this campaign. And I'm an aggressive prosecutor, as backed up by Sheriff Parker and all the police chiefs. They know my aggressiveness. That's why they're supporting me. And so my commitment is that will be a priority.
All right, very good. Ryan Vescio.
Well, Jeff and I are very close personal friends, and I can say that Jeff and I, going to lunch every day, have lots of different disagreements and everything from focuses of the office to who our favorite college football teams are. And we'll leave football out of this. But
we couldn't do that in the sheriff's race. I don't know why.
Well,
but go ahead.
We won't talk about the host of that conversation. But, I look at where we're at today. And, the leadership of this office, and my opponent has been a strong component of that leadership since 99, as he shared on the show. The current leadership is not getting the job done. And this has nothing to do with faith of other agencies. I've worked with the FDLE agents. One of the last cases I was involved in was a county commissioner in Orange County who was accepting $6,000 in cash bribes to do her job. We used FDLE, a special agent, who wore a camera in that case, who got her fanning the money and saying, you just bought influence. My focus of these cases has nothing to do with my faith in law enforcement. Our officers can get the job done. It's a focus and priority of prosecution. And one thing I think that my opponent said is absolutely true. The perception of corruption gets at the heart of our community. And I'll be honest with you. You hear it on your show almost every day. People don't trust government. But they also don't trust that the state attorney's office has taken a position on these cases because they just haven't. The office has, this race hasn't even been on the ballot in the last 20 years. There's been no opposition for this office to focus on what it's needed to. And we see time and time again, there should be a fraud unit already in place. There should absolutely be a corruption unit in place. And you know what? I hope that my corruption unit never has to actually prosecute somebody, because that means that we're all playing by the rules. But you and I both know just this year we've seen 3 or 4 instances of no-bid contracts, of questions about kickbacks and inappropriate relationships. A lot of times those are ethical concerns, but they do cross the criminal line. I've seen that in our work, and this office is not focused on it. I can bring my experience and my track record of fighting these cases, of knowing what they look like. And I'm telling you and telling all of your listeners and our voters that under my administration, we are going to fight corruption. And it's not going to be popular, and I might not be the most liked guy in the community because of it, but you know what? It's not my job to be popular and be friends with everybody. It's my job to make us safe, but also bring integrity back to our government.
All right, very good. Phil, you have any more there?
No, I think summed it up.
Okay, very good. Let me ask you this, and we're about out of time. These segments just go so fast. If folks want more information from you about your candidacy, about your experience, what's the best way for them to reach out to you? What's the best place for them to get information?
Actually, go to our webpage at electphilarcher.com. It'll have phone numbers to actually reach out and get a hold of me or anybody else in the campaign. It'll have the platform on there. It'll have all the information they need.
Very good. Ryan Vescio, how do folks get a hold of you?
They can go on the web to VoteVescio, VESCIO.com. They can see us on Facebook and Twitter, or I'll see lots of you out at our 13 early voting locations and on Election Day.
Very good. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Very informative radio show and this bonus video segment. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you back here next time on WMMBAM.com.